Okay, we are live.
We are.
Hello there, it's Joel from The Mentionables. We're still taking a look at the atheist video, 7 Signs You May Be an Atheist One Day. Today we're looking at the 6th sign provided in that video. Enjoy.
Number 6. You know your faith foundation is only good enough for you. You acknowledge that your God belief is only based on personal experience. I grew up as religious as they come. I believed it with all of my heart, and it was the core thing about me. It was the center of my personality. And at a certain point, between being totally religious and atheist, I realized that the reasons why I believed those things that I felt were what atheists often refer to as anecdotal evidence. These were personal experiences that I had identified as religious experiences because of influence of other people's stories. I took what I had heard of people in similar circumstances and assumed that the conclusion they came to for their experience was the same I came to. Growing up religious, I thought I felt the Holy Ghost. And that was certainly the thing that stuck out the most to me, that I had witness borne to me. And then the day came when I couldn't explain a lot of the things that I admitted were inconsistent and seemed strange about a world with a loving God, but I just knew it was the case. And this was one of my steps toward losing my religion. Losing my religion. When I finally realized my reasons for believing weren't good enough for anybody besides me. And finally, the day came where I had to acknowledge that the reasons why I believed were really only good reasons for me, or at least I thought so at the time.
Okay, now for the 6th objection. Your religious foundation is only good enough for you. This one's weird. Basically, it says that one's personal testimony shouldn't be built on personal testimony of others. But then all he did was give his almost evangelistic personal testimony of his apostasy and rejection of his religious upbringing. It really was clearly a kind of in-group backpattery that he seems blissfully ignorant that it violates the very thing that he's saying. So by his same rationale, if he lets the scalpel cut both ways, that would mean that many will come to theism for the same kind of reasons. In fact, as many know, I'm one who grew up in a secular and non-religious home in a very secular and non-religious area of the country and left atheism because of its intellectual failings. I also want to make this segment as a launch pad for another theme I see commonly in the rhetoric of online atheism. They seem to commonly assume that if you believe something because you were brought up to believe it, that this somehow makes that belief plausibly false or unreasonable for some reason. Now, if they merely mean that we should ask questions and not believe it merely because we were raised that way, then sure, that makes sense. But commonly, the claim seems to be far stronger than that. And I just am not convinced that it's true. I think there's a common grace principle of appropriation. I think there is a lot of value in being raised to believe certain things, certain moral claims, certain cultural mores, views about science itself, the benefit of society and government, the value of education, and so forth. There quite literally is an innumerable list of beliefs that we hold simply because of our parents or our society or late modern Western American culture that we hold without much reflection. Should we question it? Sure. Question everything. But does it mean that the belief is plausibly false or unreasonable simply because it's a community belief that we share in common with our parents and subculture? I just don't think so. And the atheist would need to demonstrate that principle. Ironically, they can't merely just assume it because they were brought up to think it. So basically, this was just his evangelistic attempt to have his personal testimony prove to us the validity of the atheistic experience while claiming we shouldn't allow other people's personal testimonies to be evidence to us about the validity of truth claims. A little ironic, I guess.
Okay, so the claim here is that if you were to discover that your reasons for being a Christian are only applicable to you through personal experience, then you may become an atheist someday. I actually tend to agree with him here. So, I'm only going by anecdotal evidence, but based on what he said about his own experience and what I've heard in a number of other cases, yeah, I think it's fair to say that if someone comes to a point where they realize that they only believe in God because of a personal experience they've had, and they can't generalize that personal experience to more of reality or to other people, that they don't have good grounds upon which to place their beliefs. And that may well lead to atheism. Okay, so a relationship with God, a religion, is similar to a romantic relationship in that with a romantic relationship, the two people involved will encounter each other, they'll have a first impression, and that first impression is typically the launching point for the relationship. So physical attraction or attraction to a certain charisma or personal attribute that the person has. That's a pretty superficial thing to base a relationship on, but it is the thing that launches the relationship. Thereafter, if they get into a relationship, they begin to know each other. They begin to see how their particular characteristics interact with each other, and if they're a good pair, and if they aren't, they tend to break up. A relationship built entirely on that initial impression, that first flame of romance, tends to be the kind that fizzles out and disintegrates. Religions are very similar. I don't think it would be fair to say that many people who are Christians became Christians because they studied the evidence, because they went over the facts, because they sat down and critically thought about the entire issue. I think it would be intellectually dishonest to say that. I think that most people who are Christians probably are Christians through a personal experience that they had, or through something they were taught by an authority figure, something like that. Now, that doesn't mean that the reason they became a Christian in the first place is the reason that they've stayed a Christian in the long run. If this series and others like it, if the individuals are participating in this process, or in the Mentionables or other organizations are any evidence, there is a significant number of Christians who have actually sat down and thought critically about their beliefs and typically revised their beliefs as a result of that critical thought. So, yes, if somebody wakes up one day and decides that the only reason they believe in God is because they, quote, felt the Holy Spirit or something inside of them, and that's not a good enough reason to build your reality around, there's a chance they might lose it because it's not good grounds to believe it on. That doesn't mean that there aren't good grounds upon which to believe it. It just means that that particular person didn't have those. So, over the thousands of years that the Judeo-Christian religion has been around, there have been a number of very deep thinkers. They're available for people to check out. And so a lot of the critical thought that should be put into the process has been put into the process. One cannot say that there are no critical reasons to believe in God. The only reason we believe in God is through indoctrination or through personal experience and so forth. There are more reasons than that. It's just that some people never go through that critical thought process.
Okay, so this one is actually kind of sad for me. I've watched a number of Mr. Atheist videos and know that he comes from a Mormon background. Sadly, from this background, this is not really a surprising kind of reason for becoming an atheist. Mormonism, you see, relies heavily on personal experience. When you see past that, what is left is seemingly not much. However, just because this is the case for Mormons and some fundamentalist groups that have very narrow views, it does not mean that it equates to all religious people. In fact, as a Christian, I'm thankful this isn't the case. The evidence I have that convinces me is some of the same evidence that has convinced many of brilliant men and women for centuries, people who are a lot smarter than me. I mean, that's really all there is to say here. One word of caution, though, to parents. Don't let this be your kids. The Christian belief system should not be based on personal experience alone. It should be based on evidence and logic. Personal experience is rarely sufficient evidence for belief to hold up when it comes under scrutiny. And Christianity really doesn't have to worry about that because there is evidence that supports it and backs up the personal experiences.
So number 6, this idea that if you realize that your religious experience is just good enough for you. Well, okay, now that might be something to make you stop and go, okay, am I really experiencing this right? Am I really thinking about this correctly? See, because one thing you need to understand is there's a difference between knowing something and showing something. You can have first-person private experience that is trustable, that is credible, that is something that you should say, yeah, I know that is true because I experienced it. Well, can you demonstrate it and prove it to someone else? No, I can't. Let's say you're accused of murder. And where were you at the time of the crime? Well, you were at home, binge watching Stranger Things on Netflix. Why you're behind on that show at this time, I don't know. It's been out forever. You should have seen it by now. But for some reason, you're just now getting caught up. And so you were home by yourself, no one else around, binge watching Netflix. Okay. Can you prove your innocence? Do you have an alibi? Can you actually show where you were? You know where you were. You know what you were doing. That is a first-person private experience that only you can be convinced of. Can you demonstrate that and convince anyone else of it? Nope. No, you can't. So therefore, are you irrational in belief? Are you now on the way to thinking, maybe I really did kill somebody? No, you're not. Because you know there's a difference between knowing something and showing something. Just because I can't show you doesn't mean that it didn't really happen, that I'm not justified in my believing it. But let's say that you actually, okay, fine, it's like I have this private first-person experience that I can't show to anyone else, so oh no, that's just me. I'm just believing. Well, hold on a second. You may not be aware of this. Maybe it is that your experience is the only thing you have to go on, and that is what your faith is built on. That could possibly be justified. It's called the principle of credulity. This idea that you're rational to believe something until you find reason to not believe it. Okay. But guess what? Outside of your experience, there is a lot of other reason to believe Christianity is true outside of your own experience. Right? So if you're kind of questioning and starting to go, well, you know what? This is just my experience. Well, go explore, go seek, go find the answers. Because there are a lot of people out there, the reason they believe has nothing to do with their first-person private experience. They looked at the evidence external to themselves and came to the conclusion. So go find that out. You don't need to go traipsing down the yellow brick road to atheism. You can pull back the curtain, see the wizard for what he is, and actually understand that, no, that there's evidence, that there's more to it than that.